Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this second episode of our webinar series, NI Case Studies on Climate Action. Today, we will be talking about the energy sector in Northern Ireland, and I am really delighted to welcome our guests. So today we have Alan Campbell from SONI, the system operator for Northern Ireland, and we have Mark Wiggins from Power NI. So just a few words of introduction. First of all, this webinar is part of our Business Action on Climate campaign, where we want to challenge and support all businesses in Northern Ireland to address the climate emergency. As you know, it is, well, a small crisis coming our way, I would say. So welcome everyone. We are here together for 45 minutes. I hope you have a nice cup of tea with you today, and I hope you will enjoy this webinar. If you want to know more about the Business Action Climate campaign, please reach out to us or go visit our website, bitcni.org.uk/climate. So if we can have a look at the agenda. Oops, there you go. So as I said, 45 minutes together. We will start with a quick poll in a few minutes. Well, quick poll, the quick quiz rather, in a few minutes. And then we'll hear from our guest speakers, whom I've already introduced. And you will have time to ask questions at the end of the webinar. So usually we have 10 to 15 minutes for this. You can type your questions in the questions or the chat box that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. So please don't hesitate. We will have time for them at the end of the webinar. And well, that's it, 45 minutes together. So I hope you enjoy the ride. So as I've said, let's start with a quick quiz just to keep you awake and to start well. How much of the energy we use in Northern Ireland comes from renewable sources? Is it 12%, 49%, 68%, or 81%? How much of the energy we use in Northern Ireland comes from renewable sources? So you should be able to vote. There we go. So we'll leave you a few minutes to vote. Okay, just a couple more seconds. Okay, can we see the results, Claire, please? So more than half of you think that it's 49%, and you are correct. We are almost half of the energy we use comes from renewable sources, and 85% of this renewable energy comes from wind in Northern Ireland, which is not that surprising. Whenever you try to have a walk outside, you can sort of tell it's the right energy. Well, anyway, let's move on to our speakers. So I'd like to welcome Alan from SONI to start us off and to tell us about what SONI and what the system operator is doing to prepare us for a better future. Hi, Alan, and welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Geraldine. Yeah, I'm Alan Campbell. I'm the Managing Director at SONI, the electricity system operator for Northern Ireland. I'd just like to welcome or echo that welcome for the guests. It's great to see such a diverse range of people, particularly from across Northern Ireland businesses, all represented today. Just at SONI, we're really pleased to be a member of the Business and the Community Climate Steering Group in Northern Ireland. We've signed the pledge to reduce our own emissions, and I'd encourage the attendees in the call today, if you haven't already signed up, I really encourage you to get involved in an ambitious and exciting opportunity. Addressing climate change and sustainability in Northern Ireland, it's really important for Northern Ireland businesses, and we want to make a contribution, and I know everyone else here does today. So just a bit about SONI, first of all. We're the electricity transmission system operator for Northern Ireland. That means our kind of central role is to plan and operate the electricity transmission system. We also operate what's called the single electricity market, and we manage the power flows on interconnectors with our neighbours. This gives SONI a real whole system perspective, and it's because of this, because of our role, it gives us the deep expertise in terms of what's required to help decarbonise the electricity system. So if you just want to move on to slide 2 for me there, please. Just click on slide 2 if you don't mind. But correct on anyway. Yeah, that's it now. Thank you. So look, just everyone on the call, they'll be aware of the challenges in the. So we're going to slide 3. Have I got control of the slides? If you can go back a slide, please.
No, I think there's just a slight delay between whenever you ask for the slide and when it comes up.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Yep, we're on that slide. Thank you. So just everyone on the call be aware of the challenges on the journey to reaching a decarbonised electricity system. The Minister for Economy has recently stated her vision for 2030 of no less than 70% of electricity to be consumed from clean energy sources. That's great to see, and energy policies being developed. We're working towards already making this vision a reality. The transition to 70% requires changes in the generation mix and reinforcement of the electricity grid over the next decade. It includes a further increase in renewable generation, renewable resources being connected to the grid, and the continued retirement of fossil fuel generation sources. And this means we'll also need to look at building new grid infrastructure. This is needed to make the grid more stronger, more flexible, so it can effectively handle how energy is produced. At SONI also, we note the Committee for Climate Change's 6th carbon budget paper and the requirement for not just electricity, but also the heat and transport sectors in Northern Ireland to help deliver a share of the emissions reductions required for 2050. And look, to get there, we'll need partnership and collaboration in terms of what's getting the best outcome for consumers in Northern Ireland. And for SONI, that means working very closely with NI Networks as a key partner. So we have a key part to play in the net zero journey to 2050, and we know that the power system is going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting. We talked there about the heat and transport, so things like electric vehicles and how we actually heat our homes is going to change over the next 20 or 30 years. But the next 10 years is going to be critical. For getting to 2030, we really need to act now, and we're getting on with that now. So I'll talk to you a bit more about what we're doing. So in terms of change, if you can just move on to the next slide for me, please. Where are we now? Northern Ireland's done really well. We've already hit the 40% target. It's great to see so many people recognise there that only recently the DFE's announced that we've got close to 50% of our power coming from renewable sources. So that's a huge achievement. Not just like SONI, we have to integrate all that renewable on the grid, but also there's a huge reliance on partners, be even the generators, market participants, and colleagues, as I say, with NI Networks and government to actually make this all happen. But to get to 70% by 2030, it's a lot to do, and only 9 years to do it. So it's going to need transformational change in the energy sector. We're going to see the electricity is going to be used for more purposes. So for things like heating our homes and getting our transport, we're going to be looking at electricity as a clean energy source to enable those sectors to reduce their carbon footprint. And that's going to result in increasing demand for electricity, and then increasing need correspondingly for more renewable sources to actually meet that demand. So for 2030, for example, we probably expect to see nearly 100,000 electric vehicles in Northern Ireland. So you can just imagine what's going to be needed there from an infrastructural perspective, and also how we actually meet that energy demand. So as well, Géraldine noticed at the start, or she kind of reflected on how windy Northern Ireland can be at times, but we're going to see a lot of that renewable energy delivered both from onshore wind, but even more so offshore wind is going to be critical in getting that. And yeah, believe it or not, Northern Ireland will have solar as a source of energy, and we already do. And there'll be other clean sources of technology, such as battery storage being developed, that's going to be needed there. In terms of facilitating that, we're going to need the electricity grid to be made stronger and more flexible. And that there in turn means more infrastructure and investment to deliver on a green energy system required for the energy transition. And So the energy transition is going to be, help move the green economy forward. It'll be opportunities for Northern Ireland. Like a lot of people in Northern Ireland, we already recognise that we've got a unique, set of scenarios here in Northern Ireland. We've got a great industrial heritage, we've great natural resources, and also we have a real growing economy and data and a skilled digital workforce. So that's going to mean that we can help put data at the center of the energy transition as well. Okay, if you can move on to slide 4 for me, please. So in 2019, Sony published our own corporate strategy for the next 5 years, and putting that at the heart was transforming the power system for the future generations, recognizing the climate crisis that's unfolding in front of us. In terms of how that's moving forward, look, we have already mentioned Minister Dodds has restated that ambition for 70% renewable electricity by 2030, as we set on about delivering for the UK's net zero ambitions. The Minister has already stated how ambitious she wants the strategy to be, and that she wants stakeholders and investors to be aware of that. And this is a clear signal for us, particularly in industry, to start pushing on and making ourselves ready to enable that their strategy. In terms of Sony, we've mobilised our strategy, as I say, and it's going to be key to realising Northern Ireland's ambition as we can build back post-COVID and making sure that the green growth strategy is front and centre of the recovery. But in terms of just getting there, there's going to be significant challenges to overcome. Firstly, operating the power system with this increasing amount of renewables, it's far more unpredictable. Like we all know that there's times where the wind can be blowing a gale one day, and then the next day, could be a lovely still calm day. So managing that variable sources is going to be challenging, and in particular, it's a lot more subject to consumer behaviour rather than just pure business incentive. So we're going to see new and evolved digital systems that'll be able to accurately predict supply and demand and help us forecast when and where the power is needed. Then grid management tools and distribution management tools is going to be critical for the reliability of grid operations. And next, I'm going to talk around potentially new grid infrastructure being needed. We all know that social acceptance can be a challenge. It's difficult and costly to build new generation and transmission assets, particularly because of the environmental impacts and the perceived social impacts that can come along with those. And then just in terms of how we actually incentivize people and look at that, we need to look at market signals and make sure that people are ready to invest because they know that they'll make a return on those investments. So we'll need to look at what other services might be needed on the electricity system, things like what's called reactive power and inertia and reserves. These will all increase in value. We need to make sure the market arrangements are there and evolve so we can use them efficiently. And just finally, increasing demand. As I mentioned, we're going to see probably an uptake in the actual use of electricity for heating and transport. We're predicting that nearly 50% increase in the next 10 years, and we're going to have to meet that, through more renewable sources, but also the complexity of those system operations I talked around. We can move on to the next slide, please. In terms of the range of renewable generation, we need that for a secure and efficient electricity supply. It's going to support economic recovery and drive investment that will allow Northern Ireland to respond effectively to the climate crisis and to deliver on our climate and renewable reduction or emissions reduction ambitions. So this is going to mean, as I say, likely doubling the amount of renewable generation that's currently on the grid in Northern Ireland. It's going to mean reinforcing the grid with more infrastructure, basically to remove bottlenecks and make the grid more reliable. And we need to do that at the time when, at the moment, we need to be able to handle probably in the order of 70% of renewables actually connected to the grid at any one time, so that whenever there is those days when there's less wind on the system, that we're still pushing on and actually maximizing the amount of renewables across the year. So we started a trial there in January of 70% of renewables connected to any or generating at any one point in time. Technically, that's challenging in terms of electrical science, and we're pushing the boundaries there. We are recognized as one of the world leaders in this here, particularly for such a small island in the scale of things. And later this summer, we're looking to move that on to 75%. And for 2030, we recognize we'll need to go upwards of 95% at any one time of renewables connected. So we just want to flick on to the next slide. So this next slide should show, it will probably be quite interesting to a lot of people in terms of what we would see as the change in the generation portfolio over the next 10 years from a system that's still quite reliant on fossil fuel generation to actually one that's more reliant on renewables. So you'll see out towards the west increasing amounts of renewables in terms of those green bubbles, reducing then bubbles in terms of fossil fuel generation, the black and the orange there. But also offshore wind is something that we see as part of the energy mix for 2030. So off to the east coast, we show a bubble there where there's potential for offshore wind to be connected. And that's going to be vital for Northern Ireland to actually hit those increased renewables. Okay, if you want to click on the next slide, please. So in terms of how we're looking to get there, we don't believe the journey from power system to net zero is going to be insurmountable. It's going to be, it will be a challenge. But looking out to 2030, we believe we can meet the minister's ambitions. But we need to do this in a coordinated, collaborative way, because the system operator or the system owner, we're not going to be able to do this by ourselves. It needs everyone to be, part of the solution here. The all-island market is going to have to evolve, and the way we operate the grid is going to have to be more dynamic and maybe more stronger and more flexible. It's going to impact, there's going to be changes for everyone in Northern Ireland. That's why we want everyone from businesses, agricultural, consumers, communities to have a say in how we are approaching this. And indeed, a whole of government and a whole of system approach is needed to drive this contribution to tackle climate change. So in terms of how we're responding, we've undertaken an extensive piece of work, what we're calling shaping our electricity future. And it's a detailed analysis, and we've actually just launched a public consultation on this just over 2 weeks ago today. It's had a huge kind of it's had a lot of publicity in the first couple of weeks of that there, and we're really now keen to hear feedback from business and industry and the public as we move forward. So we just want to go on the next slide. I'll just talk around some of the strands that are in that strategy, or the shaping our electricity future project. So look, we see there's 3 main strands to this here: the grid, the system operations, and the markets. So if we're to achieve the decarbonisation and the government's targets and the Climate Change Act for the UK, we're going to have to take a holistic and ambitious approach. It's going to have to consider those 3 strands that I talked around, see what can be achieved for 2030. And sitting underneath this here, in particular the grid area, we've identified 4 potential pathways that Northern Ireland can take on this, and this is what one of the key pieces that we're looking to consult on. So just in terms of 4 approaches, they're not mutually exclusive. We probably see that there's going to be a mix of each of those in terms of our final plan, and it's going to mean policy change or potentially policy change to actually help deliver those. But we feel it's important to put those out there now at this stage so that people can properly consider what's needed. So the 4 pathways that we currently see, there's what's called a generation-led approach. And this is where government policy defines where is the best location for new renewable generation to actually locate and connect to the grid. And this gives consideration to where the strength of the local grid is, the renewable sources, and the local demand for electricity. This approach needs less network reinforcement, and it lowers the overall network investment cost and it enhances deliverability. The next approach is what's called a technology-led approach. It broadens the use of existing technologies and makes the grid more resilient more quickly. It's going to use more underground cables to actually move a lot of power from the west to the east of the province, the east being where a lot of the power is currently used, but the west is where, if you recall back in the map, a lot of that renewable electricity is generated. So the deliverability of this option, it's a lot more challenging. There's a lot more complexity in it. There's also higher cost involved. So this is going to be actually something that people consider whenever we're looking forward to the future approaches. The next approach is what's called demand-led. So this is where we look to seek and influence government policy so that demand, large-scale electricity users, big business or data centers, they actually locate closer to where the renewable sources are actually connecting onto the grid. This approach is to help sort of incentivize demand, and it's something that we can use to optimize the network development and our network planning. In the short to medium term, this approach is more applicable to the Republic of Ireland because they have a lot more transmission connected demand, such as data centers. But long term, Northern Ireland, it's an approach that we need to consider. And then look, lastly, it's what's called a developer-led approach. This is more or less the approach that we currently have at the moment, where developers can choose where they want to get connected to the grid, and it's probably what we call as business as usual type case. Now this will deliver the 70% renewable target, but it won't deliver it for 2030, where we predict in around 2035 before we'll be able to deliver 70% renewables. And this is really because when renewables connect in remote parts of the grid, there's a lot more network congestion or bottlenecks, and that means more grid infrastructure needs to be built. And that obviously comes with the societal impacts and the planning impacts that go along with this. Okay, if you want to move on to the next slide for me, please. So I mentioned yes, our consultation. So yeah, we launched that earlier this month. It's looking at a collaborative and agreed approach to actually delivering net zero for 2030. It's going to, we all recognize that growing the decarbonised electricity sector is going to help springboard the green economy and help that flourish. And it's going to provide a lot of opportunities in that area, and also for economic rebalance to the west of the band. In terms of our consultation, we feel that this comes at an opportune time. Most people will be aware the Department for Economy is shortly going to launch their consultation on their draft energy strategy. So what our Shaping Electricity Future consultation will do is really going to help us feed more evidence into that wider energy strategy debate, and will help policy advisors and government departments and ourselves look at what the solutions are going to be going out to 2030. So really, probably my ask in terms of the audience today is really like you to get involved. We'll put up details of where you can see this information from the SONI website. We'll put this up in the chat shortly, and we'll be holding a number of workshops for people to actually get involved and see more detailed presentations on this here and have their say. So we're having an industry workshop on the 20th of April, and then we're having a civil society forum in May. So we'll share that detail with folks, and really like folks to get involved if they can. Okay, look, if you want to just kind of flick on the last slide, look, just big thanks again, Géraldine, Claire, and the team there at Business and Community. Really appreciate you putting us on. I'm sure look, there'll be a lot of questions coming up, and I'm really pleased to take those towards the end. If there's anything we can't address today, we're more than happy to follow up with people. And just encourage everyone to take part. So look, thanks, Géraldine. I'll hand back to yourself. You can introduce Mark.
Thank you so much, Alan. That was a really great overview and really interesting view of the challenges that we are facing and you are facing. So thank you for that high-level perspective. I'd like to welcome Mark Wiggins now from Power NI for another point of view, or a complementary point of view of another player in the energy sector. So welcome, Mark, and yeah, take it away.
Commercial product innovation lead at Power NI. So yeah, I'd just like to start by saying thanks to Géraldine and Business in the Community for asking us to come along and speak today. Power and I are delighted to be climate champions, and today I'm very briefly going to chat to you around what we're doing within our own organisation to help minimise our impact on the environment, but also what we can do as an electricity supplier to help customers on their own decarbonisation journey. So if you go to slide 1, please, Claire. So just to give you a bit of background, Power and I are part of Energia Group, which you may have previously known as Viridian Group before we rebranded in 2019. At Energia Group, our 3 key business areas are renewable generation, flexible generation, and customer solutions. So Power and I sit within customer solutions, and as of this year, we have been supplying homes, farms, and businesses across Northern Ireland for 90 years. As of today, we're very proud to have just under 500,000 customers across Northern Ireland, and we have around 55% domestic and 54% commercial market share. So as a business, we have 3 offices in Belfast, Antrim and Omagh, and we have 415 direct employees. And like many companies, we have had to adapt, and most of our staff are working remotely today. Next slide, please. So in terms of the overall energy sector then, it's widely recognised that these 4 words, which are known as the 4 Ds, are going to transform the energy sector for years to come. So we've got decarbonisation, deregulation, decentralisation and digitisation. These are massive topics within themselves, and we are committed to being a modern customer-centric utility and playing our part in all of these areas. But for today, our focus is just going to be on decarbonisation. So our growing renewable energy portfolio as part of Energia Group consists of 15 onshore wind farms, which generate over 300 megawatts of green electricity and an additional 900 through our power purchase agreements. So in terms of electricity, we supply around 40,000 businesses across Northern Ireland with around 55 gigawatts of electricity provided as green energy, and this is constantly growing. Another interesting point is that we have an eco-energy tariff being launched later this year, which will be aimed at our domestic customers. Next slide, please. So the first step any company can take towards reducing their impact on the environment is to choose to be powered by green energy generated from 100% renewable sources. And at Power NI, we're delighted to be helping companies on that journey. So when a customer makes a switch to 100% green, we'll provide them with a green energy certificate along with where their electricity is generated from. So for example, this could be a local wind farm, which we have allocated to that customer, and we'll provide them with a government issued certificate of origin, which is known as a REGO. Secondly, then we have NICEP grants available for our commercial customers. These help towards the cost of installing things like LED lighting, heat recovery systems, and intelligent heating controls. And for any attendees today that may be interested, the next round of funding for that opens in May. And do check our website for more information on that. Next slide, please. So in terms of a couple of brief case studies, we've partnered with these two companies, and you can see they're very good yet different examples. So firstly, we've got CDE Global, who are the world's #1 wet processing equipment company. They have their state-of-the-art headquarters based in Cookstown. So for CDE, a switch to green was a simple solution that had a big impact for them. So we supply CDE with around 2.1 gigawatt hours of green energy. And to try and put that into some context, that's around the same amount that it would take to power, say, 650 homes across Northern Ireland for 1 year. So overall, locally sourced 100% green electricity will now see CDE save around 600 tonnes of CO2 each year. So as you can see, a big difference with a very simple solution. On the smaller scale of things, then we have woodland, garden and lifestyle that are based out in Carryduff. So they were able to avail of our NICEP grant and received £780 towards the installation of new LED lighting for their premises, which was funded by NICEP. As a result, they've been able to save £1,800 per year off their energy bills. And they have longer lasting light bulbs that don't need replaced as often. And I suppose as a byproduct of that, it's also transformed the look of their garden centre. Next slide, please, Claire. So in terms of our own internal decarbonisation measures and what we do at Power NI, so we like to try and get as much engagement from our staff as possible. And we established a green team, which consists of numerous employees from across different business functions and areas. So our green team was established to help us enhance our green credentials. Our key goals are to minimise our carbon footprint, set targets for reducing energy usage, and encourage sustainability in everything that we do as a business. We aim to make reductions in electricity use in all of our buildings, general waste going to landfill, and change the behaviours of our staff. We have bi-monthly newsletters which go out, and the idea is to try and help educate our staff on sustainability and environmental issues. And you can see some of the key successes we've had to date. We've installed our own LED lighting across all of our sites. We're on 100% renewable electricity tariff ourselves, and we've installed electric vehicle charge points across all of our car parks, and we recently purchased our own electric vehicle, as you can see on the screen, and this acts as a pool car for all our staff. And the idea is to try and get our own staff educated on the electrification of transport and the future. So if you go to the last slide then, please, Claire. So just to close then, we realise that for some companies, they'll be a lot further along with their journey in terms of decarbonisation than others. So I just wanted to give you a very brief flavour of some of the other projects that we're working on across Energia Group. So we've got a hydrogen bus project, which is a partnership between ourselves, TransLink and Rightbus, in which we as a business are supplying the hydrogen for. In terms of electric vehicles, then we're installing a number of electric vehicle charge points for our commercial customers, and we've got a domestic electric vehicle tariff coming out later this year. And we're involved in a very innovative project with Armitage Technologies in the maritime space. And lastly, then we're commencing a number of large battery storage projects across NI and ROI. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of some of the other projects and schemes that we as a business are working on. So I think in closing, I would just say that this is a journey for us all, and hopefully I have demonstrated there are some easy steps you can take, but there's also some complex steps. So I suppose if any attendees today did have any ideas or would like advice on possible decarbonisation projects, then certainly don't hesitate to get in touch, because for me, the only way we can achieve net zero is through proper partnerships and collaboration. And that's me, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was really interesting and great to see some of the case studies as well that you have presented. If you can bring back Alan, thank you. So I'd just like to ask the audience to ask questions in the chat box or in the questions box. We already have a few who have come up. Just well, no, that's a note I will do later. So the first one would be for Alan. How do you see smart grid options and development? So trying to summarize the question here, enable initiative like consumer initiatives like EV battery utilization or community generation and excess sold onto the grid. So about smart grid options and development, yes.
I'm sorry, Géraldine, some of that was breaking up for me. I think the question was around how communities can get involved and actually getting connected onto the grid. One area that we've seen, just kind of talking, kind of what I've seen is that there are some demonstration projects out there. I know there's one called the Girona project up in Coleraine, which looks to basically use how data can be used, and they've also integrated solar panels on rooftops and batteries, and they're looking at how they, how all of that can work together to then basically sell back power to the grid or provide services such as demand side management, where demand can be reduced whenever the actual grid's under strain. So that would be one area that certainly at domestic and small scale commercial and residential could work in the system. So as I say, the question was breaking up when you asked it, but hopefully that gives some answer to that one.
Yeah, absolutely. It was about you got the community generation part right, and it was about the role of smart grid development in that type of initiative. To Mark, is there an upper megawatt limit regarding commercial contract?
Again, sorry, you broke up me, Géraldine. Could you say that again?
I'm so sorry. I think my connection is poor. Is there an upper megawatt limit regarding commercial contracts?
No, there's no upper limit.
No limit. Okay. Is there any grant funding available for the electric vehicle charge points?
Yeah, there is. That's from me, obviously, Géraldine. Yes, there's currently 2 options available. So for domestic customers, we have there is a home charge grant available, which is issued through a government body called OLEV. So that's £350 towards the cost of installing a home place charger. Then for commercial customers, there's a workplace grant, which again is £350 towards the installation of charge points up to 40 sockets, I believe. So yes, there is grant funding available, but your installer should be able to look after that process for for anybody that is interested in that.
Okay. Alan, you mentioned the big challenges involved in achieving the required transformation in the electricity system. Sorry, which of these would you say is the biggest challenge of all, and how are you planning to address it?
Thanks, Géraldine. Yeah, look, there's probably a range of challenges involved, and probably the biggest, there's probably maybe 2 or 3 actual really big ones. First of all, just the engineering around this. So we believe that we need to push the boundaries of electrical science, or certainly how it's actually applied at a practical level in the transmission network. And so we're going to have to look at solutions there. So actually see how we can harness and utilize the really large levels of renewable electricity sources that we have in abundance around Northern Ireland. It's doubling what we use today. As I mentioned, we're looking at, historically we would have had quite low levels of renewables on the grid. Now we're looking at pushing that by 2030, getting to a point where nearly all the power is coming from renewables at any one point in time. So to do that, we really need to this joined up approach and really across industry, government, communities and landowners. Policy is going to be ambitious. So as I mentioned, we're supporting the delivery of the DFE's strategy, how that can work to deliver for Northern Ireland and be attractive both for green energy developers, but also basically managing the, recognizing that consumers are central to this as well, and protecting the interests of consumers. And like in other areas, we're engaging, in terms of planning. We want to see improvements in the planning system so that we recognize that large-scale infrastructure, it does take a long time to develop. So we need, we're pleased to see, for example, when wind farms get, the planning permission, obviously we recognize fully that there's a need to engage with communities and make sure that they're all treated, fairly in that respect. So we're looking at, can we have a community fund, for example, so that communities that maybe host the infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure for connecting the likes of wind farms or new lower carbon generation, that those communities are compensated, if you like, for having the grid infrastructure in their areas. And look, all of this just takes buy-in from industry and consumers, and I suppose we recognize those changes aren't going to be possible without that collaboration and cooperation across all sectors.
Great, thank you. A question for Mark on the on the pool electric vehicle for staff. How is that implemented in practice? Is there, for example, an online booking system? And how did the staff react to that initiative?
Yeah, no, good question. So yeah, in terms of the administration of it, the insurance essentially covers every staff member that has a driving license. So they submit a paper copy of their license, and then yes, it's an online booking system. And we do try and encourage it to be used as much as possible. I think at the start there was a bit of reluctance. Number one, it's an automatic car. A lot of people aren't maybe used to driving automatic cars, so that took a bit of learning to start with. And then number two, it's been described to me as being like a spaceship nearly when you get into it. It's got absolutely everything. And speed, because there's no engine as such in it, it just essentially takes off. If anyone's driven an electric vehicle, they'll realise that you don't have to put it into first gear and sort of start going. So the uptake was slow at the start, just to be honest. But once things got going, everyone wanted to go on it. And we've got our headquarters for Energia Group down in Dublin. So it's very useful for staff going up and down there to to meetings and stuff, and then just getting into the habit of setting it to charge when you come back every evening or whatever it may be. But no, it's been a very good initiative. Obviously, it hasn't been used as much recently due to COVID, but hopefully when we get back to normality, we'll sort of get going again.
And is this something you are planning to grow in other locations, or
in terms of the fleet car?
Yeah.
Yes, we have another one down in our Dublin office, which has got Energia branding all over it. So I think the idea would be to have one nearly in every site if we can justify it. And again, as I said, for us, it's just trying to educate. If we're trying to sell electric vehicles or electric vehicle tariffs, whatever it may be, it's trying to educate our own staff in that area as well, because it's a reasonably new thing for Northern Ireland and I think for everybody essentially.
Okay. Well, I personally drive an automatic, so I don't think I will be able to make the change back to a normal car, an adult car. But I like the idea of educating your staff through, well, giving them the opportunity to try something. I love this idea. Maybe just one final question for the both of you. Sorry, and I've lost it. But how are you optimistic when you see I mean, when you look at the trends, and how do you see the future Is it on the bright side or more the challenging aspects? Alan, maybe? Can you hear me, Alan? I think there's a delay, but I'm not sure how long is the delay.
Yeah, well, in terms of myself, I suppose probably there's a huge amount of challenge, obviously, to look at decarbonising the electricity sector. But I think if I kind of look back, I had the pleasure of moving back to Northern Ireland to work at Colquera Power Station back in the early 2000s, when there was, I'd say, maybe only 1 or 2% of Northern Ireland's electricity came from renewables at that point in time. And I've seen a huge transformation in the I was going to say the 20 years, but I mean, it's less than that. It's maybe 15 years since that came about. So if we kind of went from 1 or 2%, you know, just that turn of the century to nearly 50% now by 2020, I mean, that's a huge achievement, and look, Northern Ireland can be proud of that. So whilst there's a lot of challenges ahead, I think, you know, science and there'll be innovation involved, and I'm really confident we'll get there, but it will be hard work in the meantime. So that's why, you know, we need to act now, really, I suppose, and not rest on our laurels.
Great, thanks. And Mark, optimist?
Absolutely, Geraldine, always the optimist, but no doubt there's plenty of challenges ahead. But I do think with partners like Sony and NIE, you know, the future is bright. And I think one thing Northern Ireland has on its side is the size. You know, we're not an absolutely massive country with loads of grid operators and networks and various things. So I think that's something we have to remember we have on our side. Hopefully, the development of energy policy will help us along that. But I think for me, optimistic, but at the same time, everyone, I think, has a part to play in terms of education. I think if you say net zero to say the man on the street, they don't necessarily know what that means. So I think there's a role for us all in educating every stakeholder and trying to bring everybody along on that journey, because I think without that, it's not necessarily achievable. But if we can educate everybody as much as possible and show them that this is the way and this is how it can be done, then yeah, there's certainly reason to be optimistic in my opinion.
Great. Well, thank you so much to you both for participating today. That was really interesting, and again, we know energy is key in decarbonizing Northern Ireland. So very, very interesting. Thank you to you both. Just a quick reminder that the Sony Shaping Our Electricity Future consultation can be found on the Sony website. So that's sony.ltd.uk. So don't hesitate to participate. Just a final words for me. We have another webinar coming up this Wednesday at 2 o'clock again with TransLink, and we'll be looking at the hydrogen bus project. So Mark, you mentioned it, and it is really a fascinating topic. So join us on Wednesday, and the next one will be next and final one for this series will be on the 30th of March next week with Lidl and Deloitte on the retail sector. So thank you everyone for participating. If you have any follow-up questions, do reach out to us by email. And if you want to have more information on the business action on climate campaign, if you are unsure where your business can start on its climate journey, then do reach out to us. Thank you and have a great afternoon.